At 6 o'clock, it's time for our meeting. Now, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Has everybody had a chance to review the minutes? And there are the work session minutes from April 30th, the April 30th non-public work session, the May 3rd work session, the May 14th non-public work session, and the May 14th select board meeting minutes.
Make a motion, we accept the minutes for all 5 sessions as written.
Second?
It's going to be a pain in the butt, actually, because Brian was absent for the May 3rd meeting. John was absent for the May 14th. So as long as we're aware. Oh, crap. Point of order. Huh?
Do one at a time?
Yeah, one at a time. So April 30th, select board meeting minutes. Is there a motion?
So moved.
All those, a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The April 30th non-public work session. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
The May 3rd work session. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Same.
May 14th, public, non-public work session. Is there a motion?
So moved. Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
And John abstains.
Yes.
And the May 14th regular meeting minutes. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
John abstains.
Not present.
Announcements. Select Board will meet on the following dates. Our regular meetings will be on Monday, June 11th and June 25th, 2018 at 6 p.m. Work sessions prior to the regular meeting will start at 5 p.m. ESU is hosting graduations at the Allwell facility this spring as follows. Plymouth Regional High School graduation will be June 2nd at 10 a.m. And Granite State College graduation is June 10th at 10 a.m. Traffic will be restricted and extremely heavy in the downtown area during those events. All of the above meetings will be held in the town hall unless otherwise posted. Citizens wishing to be listed on the Select Board's agenda should notify the town hall before 12 p.m. the Friday before the scheduled meeting. New members are needed yet again to fill the zoning board. If interested, please submit a letter of intent to the Plymouth Select Board's office at 6 Post Office Square, Plymouth. Well, I think I'm going to comment on new permit that we just instituted. At our work session, we approved an updated roadway trench excavation permit. And this permit clarifies some, language that wasn't quite correct in the previous one. And it also became more comprehensive in explaining exactly how one should go through, doing your permit or doing an excavation and then repairing it. And there is also, new, The new permit also mandates that you accept the conditions of this permit and then initial, and you would be liable for that. And any entity that is applying for a permit shall not be able to not initial or accept the liabilities and insurance. So that is a new requirement of the permit. And it also, well, actually, we're also working on an ordinance too, to provide meat or explanatory language for the permit. And that ordinance will be discussed at a public hearing at our next select board meeting. Any comments on what was just said, or?
Well, I think one of the things that was discussed in our meeting also was that there shouldn't be any modifications to the permit by entities that may be making application. So in other words, if somebody wants to do construction on one of our roads, they can't scratch something out because they don't want to do that part, or write something in if they think something else needs to be done.
Anything else? Okay. We have a couple of appointments. The first appointment is for Lad Raine. And his letter reads as follows. I submit this letter of intent to remain a member of the Plymouth Energy Commission. My interest remains to work for the town of Plymouth towards renewable energy and reduction of wasteful use of energy in Plymouth, New Hampshire. I remain a resident of the town of Plymouth. My address is 151 Bell Road. Sincerely, Lad Raine. Is there a motion?
I move to reappoint Lad Raine to the Energy Commission.
Is there a second?
I second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Very good, Lad. The second appointment is from Neil Mclver. And his letter reads, Dear board members, if there is a position available on the Plymouth Conservation Commission, I am willing to serve. Sincerely, Neil Mclver.
I make a motion that we appoint Neil Mclver to serve on the Plymouth Conservation Commission.
Is there a second?
A second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
The next item, we have some visitors, Barbara Lopez Mayhew and Christopher and Brian Mayhew. This is a follow-up to a phone conversation and emails with the highway manager. Would you like to approach the...
Have a visual one if you need it, a couple of visuals. So essentially, it's an issue about water runoff on Old Hebron Road. So I had requested some paperwork from the town selectman's office, and I was not provided any. So being the good teacher that I can be, I'm providing this. I'm sorry for the waste of paper. I'll take it back and recycle it. If you want passing. So these are the packets. Okay, for you. And so extras. Sorry, I don't want your papers. Okay, so I know pretty much. All right, so I have just a brief introduction, and then I'll let my sons talk more technical. In regards to some water problems on our fields on 128 Old Hebron Road. So if you look on the map that I provided, These are the abutters in pink. It's circled. This was taken off of the town of Plymouth site for the assessment maps and the tax maps. And so if you see right here, what's in the yellow triangle is only a portion of the land that we own, but what is designated as 11.2 is also our land. And then they're right alongside to the left of the yellow triangle. You'll see that there is a 3-acre parcel lot, and that is the problem that we've had to deal with this winter and spring. So, also, I've included some photos of what's happening. So this was during the winter when I took a photo and we were starting to get streaming across our land. So essentially, in this photo, even though it's black and white, there is no real division between the 3 acres, that's to the left of the yellow triangle on the map, and with the yellow triangle. Okay? So you can't really discern what is the 3 acres, which belongs to or was belonging to a previous owner who's no longer across the street. And then we've got the streaming that's coming in through here, and that is our land. And then also, as you see on this side of the fence, this is the backyard behind my mother's apartment that is attached to our home on 128 Old T-Burn Road. So this little stream started going through to the back, and this is our acreage within that yellow triangle. Next photo, if you see, starts emails, but prior to that, let me talk about the timeline. So essentially what I did is when we had the storm on October 30th, and we had flooding, major flooding throughout the town, we had flooding under my mom's apartment and also under or in our basement. And that was when we had the massive torrential downpours on October 30th. I had to go to my class in the afternoon, and we went into the basement and we had to clean out the whole basement. But we didn't think anything really of it because we knew that it was a torrential downpour that happened. November 12th, we had our new neighbor who mowed part of the 3-acre parcel to the left of the triangle. Next, we had January 23rd, or prior, 23rd. Second storm came in, there was a power outage. Limbs started falling down from pine trees that are alongside the left of that yellow triangle. And just missed my mom's apartment. We went out, got a generator. Again, we didn't really think much about it, but then we started noticing a stream that was running alongside my mom's apartment from where we have some pines, spruces, and then we have a shed close to the road. So we couldn't figure out where is this water coming from. Next one was March 2018. I went into the town of Selectman's office and I spoke to Brian Murphy and Don, and then I said, I have an issue going on here. We're getting these streams of water coming through. I don't know what's happening right now. So who do I talk to? And how do we go about doing this? And so I was given Mr. Joe Fagnans, who is the director of the highway. He's the highway manager. And I was told that I should call him. So I did, first prior to the emails, and I called him on March 26th at 8:17 a.m. I told him what was happening with water coming in and streaming, and this was very unusual. And then March 26th, he called me back. So I called him in the morning, he called me back, and I explained to him what was happening. And I didn't understand again where all this water was coming from. And then, I'm sure he can explain, the conversation that he and I were having back and forth. So then I said, well, can you come up and see what's the problem? And so we were trying to then coordinate a time for him to come in and talk to me. Or talk to my sons, Brian and Christopher, who know more details about culverts and runoff. March 29th, I got a call back again from Mr. Fagnan, who told me that he could meet, I believe he had the foreman or so with him. And I said, well, my sons aren't here, so it would be so much better if they were here to talk to you, so possibly you could come in the afternoon. Except that our conversation had kind of changed from the initial conversations that we had, those prior phone conversation that we had. So then this was happening then. If you look on the packet where it's then this, I sent Mr. Fagnan an email on March 31st. It was Easter weekend. And so this was happening in my backyard. And as you will see also on that page, the fence and then the little water runoff. Let's see, I also sent 2 videos, and I'm not sure whether or not you were privy to that. So I'll show you the videos that I sent Mr. Fagnan on. This was one of the videos. It's just a 30, I don't know if you can all see it. Let me play it and then I'll try. Which would be the better way of showing this
So
to you.
just a couple at a time.
Couple
How long
at
is
a
it?
time. 30 seconds.
Over there and over here.
Okay, so this was one of the clips that I had sent to him about the water runoff in my backyard.
Mind you, snow is still on the ground. There's still significant snowpack throughout the fields.
Identify yourself, please.
Christopher May.
And then my son next to him is Brian. Is it done?
No.
Sorry, oh, no.
Still going.
Is this one that's going out onto the field?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's out in my muck boots, obviously, and that's never happened, and that's my backyard.
It's supposed to be the second one. This one. Again.
Well, I can show them. Do you mind? So this is what was happening, and it'll just go. You can do that again. There we go.
So
Okay, so, and then the next one. It'll just kind of recycle it. Sorry. That was only 16 seconds.
Yep.
Okay. Oops. So I tried putting the emails in sequence and give you directions on one of the pages. You start from the bottom and then up, so sequentially what was conversation through the email, and hence I am here with my sons to talk with you about the problem.
So what our issue stems from is that there is water being drained into our upper
Do
portion.
you want to approach the microphone too and identify yourself?
So as you can tell, we have significant water drainage coming down our fence line, which separates our fields from our house lot. And this is a first for us. We've never experienced any melt through this section of a field down through Western. I mean, we literally had a stream coming through for probably a solid 2 to maybe 3 weeks. And so we decided to try to investigate and see what is the cause of it all. So what we've requested from the town was a map that was potentially showing all the culvert locations on Old Hebron Road, especially in our upper section of the road that butts our upper field. Now, I'm not sure if we were able to find any or if we have gotten that information yet, but it appears as though there is a culvert that comes from our neighbor's house directly across the street, which then dumps water into our upper field, which is directly above our house. And through our old windbreak and everything. Now, we were told by the town, by Joe, that had been, in a conversation my mother had with him, that had been, that water had been redirected in through our pines in order to save our driveways, or our driveway from washing out. Now, we haven't really experienced much runoff past our driveway in a couple years, ever since, I think, late 90s, when our whole road washed out, that whole upper section. So we now have this mystery culvert that we do not have any recollection of it ever going in, and this seems to be the source of all of our problems. Now, it appears as though when our neighbors, the Mellows, had put in that house behind 131, I believe, is
131.
131. So when they owned that piece and they put in the second house and they cut the road in for the driveway down through the field, they pitched all that water on the road is now being pitched into the road. Or on the driveway is being pitched into the road. So what that does essentially is sheet down into our upper field and work its way back either into this culvert, which is down the ditch line on their side, or it just sheds right straight into our field. Now, there's already a culvert on the far end of our field, closer to, I believe that would be lot 7.
Where's the house?
The house is right here in the yellow.
This is the house.
Yep, so
The
this
whole
is,
triangle.
no, so this is a 1.7 acre lot,
And that's the house lot.
and that's the house lot.
Surrounded by all your property,
Yep.
which is the pink.
So is this, essentially.
So all the pink is your property?
All the pink is the abutters.
Okay.
And
So-
then this 11-2 is ours, and this is the upper field, which is in question. So right about here.
So all this
Yep.
is yours.
Yep.
And so you're thinking,
So what's happening is up here in this little triangle here is owned by, was previously owned by people who owned 5. And so now, when this was all lumped in together, 5, 4, and this little lot here. So what happened is they put in a driveway. They put a driveway in about
Are you indicating 5-1? Is that-
Yes, 5-1 would be the new house, I believe. And then their driveway, existing driveway is here, where their house is here. So they put in a new house back here.
come on,
And that's
So-
a new driveway too.
What
That's-
happened is, we're not sure if all the proper procedures were followed with putting that road in. And we don't have any information, or could not find any information on when that culvert was put into the upper field. So we're kind of trying to find that information, a date on when that culvert would have been installed, and by whom it was installed by.
And particularly because the hazard mitigation plans of 2011 and 2016 were showing that Old Hebron Road was a medium project. And then I was told by the town that any work that was done by the Department of Highway would have been just not major projects with
Right, it would have been
culverts and all.
grading.
It would have been like grading or whatever else they're doing, the pothole filling or whatever else. But a minimum, nothing major. And so then all of a sudden this culvert shows up, but nobody can actually give me information as to when and where and who and how and whether or not that was actually part of the mitigation plan or.
So that's a just show up, or has that been there for like quite some time?
That I've never noticed a culvert running into the upper portion of the field.
We've never had, there was a culvert that was running under, it was running under the driveways,
So under their driveway,
under the. and
So
then the new
essentially
driveway,
down-
The other driveway, then there was, right, under the driveway across the street from us.
right, under their driveway, there was a culvert that goes under, and there was always a ditch line for 131 Old Hebron that ran down, and their water would go underneath their driveway and would pitch down opposite of our driveway on the other side of the road. Now it appears as though that ditch line had been filled in, a culvert had been placed across the street, and all that water is now being shed off the field that would normally have gone into the ground, is now being shed right down into a ditch line that stops at that culvert and sends all that water into our upper fields. So we have been swamped out. I mean, I wasn't even able to mow. I haven't been able to do much of anything because we're still experiencing the residual effects of that water damage.
Right, we can't even mow in the back of
I
my
can't,
mom's
yeah.
apartment, like our lawn.
And it's also
because
causing,
it's also mucky.
it's also causing, well, it's mostly sand in that area above where our windbreak is, and it's mostly pines. So now what's happening is because it's so wet, we are starting to experience the pines and everything. They're starting to lean towards the house. So when we actually had that, was in March, the end of March storm, coupled with ice on it, we had tremendous.
No, it was January. And
Sure.
then,
And then March.
we had a second, March.
Right, where we had experienced a tremendous amount of ice buildup, and a lot of those trees lost limbs. And now that they're leaning more and more because of the ice and everything, it's putting our house now into a questionable state of being. So, we're just trying to find somewhat or some information on who may have done the work and if the town had anything to do with it, if and when.
Okay. Joe, could you provide some input to it? I mean, when the Mellows' son or son-in-law built that house and did that driveway, did they redirect some water under the driveway to the side of the road that would,
They got a driveway permit, and originally it was gonna be a culvert across the end of the driveway. But when they actually put their driveway in, it was steep, and they cut back into the bank, so it wasn't as steep. So at that point, when they got to the road, they actually put a culvert in across their driveway, and it was way too deep. It was a safety issue, so we took it out, put a swale there. So the water that comes down that hill hits the swale and it runs down the road and it goes into that culvert that crosses into that field, which that culvert has been there longer than I've been here. which is
Over the
close to
25 years that we've worked for the town.
right? Was there some material that was
Probably that
placed
you're talking about.
below the culvert to make all the water divert through the culvert, or you know?
No, their driveway just comes down naturally and it runs into the ditch that's been existing and runs into that culvert, which has been there as long as I've been here. It dumps into that field,
How long have you been here?
over 25 years.
Okay, I've been here for 32 years, and I've been on that property, and I've never
Yeah,
noticed
we've
it.
maintained that field, that upper field for
So-
years.
Well, I can tell you that we don't maintain it, it's about half full. And the problem is that culvert, in order for us to maintain that, we'd have to, I don't know if we have an easement for that, but we've never opened it up, because what's gonna happen is you're gonna have a big pond here. And so as long as it was flowing, we left well enough alone. It never flooded. That just goes to show you the small volume of water on the high side, because the culvert's like an 18-inch culvert, and it's only got about 10 inches that water flows through it.
What about the driveway culvert for Mellows on
There isn't
131?
one.
But there-
It goes
There
under
is
the
one.
road. It goes under the road, and it always has. And now so it goes under their driveway, essentially. So their driveway spills into the street a little bit, and then there was always a culvert that went underneath their driveway that pitched water down the ditch line that was opposite of our house. So now that's pretty much useless. No water is really even being sent down the road anymore. It's all being sent down into our open field. And I mean, this is a first that this has ever happened, where we had major flooding because of all the road water coming off, or all the runoff coming off the road.
So you're saying there's a culvert that's going under the driveway, or?
Yes, under their driveway that used to pitch water into the ditch line that's opposite of our house and everything, because the water would come down off their property and then would work its way down. I've never actually seen this culvert until we started looking around for the source of where all the water might be coming from. And, yeah.
Well, and then I have a question too, because when, you'll recall, and Paul will recall, Joe, you weren't there, but the selectmen's meeting on May 9th, 2016, when Horatio wanted to do something about the problem with the Old Hebron Road. And there was comments, because you had to deal with the conversation back and forth in regards to a situation that they had caused by.
Yes, he was after me because I went asphalt Old Hebron Road. We're very limited, Barbara, to what we can do to Old Hebron Road.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah,
That's why
and
I
we're
would
well
know,
aware of that.
I would know,
Yeah.
even as the emergency manager, if we had put that culvert across the road. Yes, there was a lot of problems at the end of the driveway and the culvert that you're referring to, but not the one in the picture that crosses the road.
Well, so here's the thing though, is if in order to pitch water onto people's property, in order to make alterations for the runoff, aren't certain easements supposed to be sought out with abutting
true.
landowners? But you guys are saying that you
That's
wouldn't,
before I,
so you wouldn't know if there was an easement at one point or not, and you
we
guys.
can't do anything like that without contacting the state.
Okay, so would we have to contact the state in order to find out the information on when this culvert was actually installed
I
and?
don't see how they would know. We've tried going through our records, we don't, it's why it's a historic road. It's,
Right. Oh,
it's
yeah.
that old, and before us, whoever did, I'm not saying that a past superintendent of the highway department won't come forward and tell us when that was done. But I can guarantee you, any neighbor out there that saw us putting a culvert across the road, we would all know about it, because I can't have Joe trim the trees out there
Right,
without getting telephone calls all day long. Because everybody's afraid when they see the trees being trimmed, that we're gonna asphalt Old Hebron Road.
Well, it's very odd too, because I recall that always during the spring melt, we've always had, and I called it when I spoke to you on the phone about the San Andreas fault at the base of our driveway.
Right.
But this year, and then you had made mention in the conversation that you had diverted water so that it wouldn't take out my driveway.
Well, I don't know if you, I'm sure I probably said that, but the way it plays out is when I grade that road, the crown of the road's right there, so the crown of the road and then the crown of the height of the road. So if I plug that completely on the ditch line, and it'll run down your field, and whatever water would run down the field. So if I take a happy medium and I grade it so a small amount goes by, it splits the difference. So a while back, we had so many problems with having to take care of your driveway, and when we graded, that got filled in a little bit, and so it split the difference, and it stopped the problem with the driveway. So
But then it created this problem.
it didn't. I don't believe that created that problem.
Do you think that it was just because of the excess water, the torrential downpours? I mean, like, it's just very
I
odd.
know we had a frozen road out there this winter, because
It was
we had
pooling right
an
at the-
odd winter, and I can see the water sheathing across the road because our trenches were frozen.
Right. But
That's,
then also it was pooling at the base of the son's driveway as well.
Yeah.
On 153, right, that new driveway that they put in. So where do we go from here?
Right, 'cause
We've never had, if we wanted little streams in our back field, then it wouldn't be a problem. But this has never occurred before, and then my backyard, and I'm feeling as though my backyard's eroding.
So
It's
do
a
you own that
problem,
whole
so-
field?
So currently, we are in the process of a lawsuit for the adjoining 3 acres of our upper field.
So is that culvert that dumps on your property or?
So that culvert dumps on the adjoining 3 acres,
Okay.
which then all that water runs down directly into the Pines, which is on splits that line.
And this is where my conversation with you got lost, because
In
I
translation.
don't want to get in the middle of a feud.
Oh.
And that culvert's been here, so I can't just go on to someone else's property and redirect water. And so the Mellows and you know, you have your agenda, what you're trying to accomplish, but I can't do it without his permission, and
And
so
hopefully it's
that's
gonna be
where-
resolved soon.
So that's where I'm at with it. It's not that we don't wanna help you, but I can't just go on someone else's property and start digging.
It just seems that since that driveway and the new house has been put in, we have experienced more water problems than we have in our
So
entire
are
existence.
you in a lawsuit with the people who put that driveway in?
We are in the lawsuit with the Mellows currently.
Who put
Horatio
that,
and
who put that
Cynthia.
driveway in?
No.
Well,
the
they
other-
would be, well, it
Well, it was
depends
their
because it's a
son-in-law
lot
and
of,
the daughter.
right,
Or
so, but whoever contracted the work for,
That was probably the parents.
most likely.
Yeah, yeah.
Correct.
Exactly. So now we're kind of in a situation where they're gone out of the picture. Well, but not completely. They had dreams of sitting or putting a house into our upper 3 acres of the upper field. And what were they gonna do with all that water? It was pitch it down into our field. I mean, I'm already experiencing tremendous tree loss. I mean, we've lost several crown oaks that are sitting down in the bottom of our property.
But before that could happen, they would have to go before the planning board.
Right.
And that's where something like that would get mitigated.
Right, we would hope at least, because,
That's, you go before the planning board, and both Bill and John serve on the planning board, that's when that would get mitigated.
right.
Before then, because it's in the courts right now, we can't
Yeah,
touch
you
it.
guys are hung up.
Well, yeah,
Right.
but we needed to bring it to your attention before, I mean, I'm doing due diligence and letting you know about the issue, because then you could question, well, why are you waiting a year later, or 6 months, or
Right.
2 years, or however long it takes to
Takes.
settle, right? But then the other thing is that I know that there was an issue with the new driveway. You had made mention of that, about cutting in the driveway, so I don't
And
know.
I stopped them from doing all those things that were wrong.
Oh, well, thank goodness, because.
But I'm saying, so we were aware of it, so I would have also said, because I watched that like a hawk, we didn't let anything happen that wasn't supposed to. And even the running of the equipment up and down the road, he got cited for. So,
So the question.
I was surprised to see the culvert there too, Barbara. I never knew that culvert was there.
Right.
But you only see what you're looking for.
Right.
I'm never looking for that culvert.
Well, we've also, I mean, we've maintained that,
Yep, you
those
lived there.
3 acres for, like, for 30-plus years, we had been living there. We had horses, cattle, my old man built that
and
upper
it's
field and
hidden,
everything,
but you would
so.
never know.
Now we're just getting to the point where, you know, if an easement does need to be sought out or something, then we're more than willing, but we're kind of stalwarted because.
And then we
of-
would have to go to the state and everything. There's
Right.
everything that we would have to do. I mean, I know you're old man, I'm his age.
Yeah.
So, we always try to help on Old Hebron Road, every 200 to 300 feet. Somebody needs something different
yeah.
on that, it's a difficult road to maintain. So we're very careful what we do with that road. And we would never intentionally put in it's a nightmare for us to do anything. It's a nightmare for us to just keep the branches trimmed.
Right,
So I don't think we'd be looking to put in culverts if we didn't have to.
right.
I was surprised to see one there. It's been buried, obviously, for a long time. If it unclogged for some reason, I don't know, like Joe said, when I looked inside it, it's half clogged. Maybe it's good that it's only half clogged. I'm not gonna let Joe, especially because you're in lawsuit. You're in court right now. We can't go on the property.
If it's been there for how many years?
I don't know.
There,
Yeah,
it's
is
been
it,
there at least 25 to 30 years.
is it a galvanized
I
or is
don't-
it HDPE?
No.
No, it looks like
it's
steel.
all galvanized or aluminum.
Okay.
And it has an actual old stone flat. It's boxed
Right,
in
like it
from
was,
that end.
yeah, exactly.
And so you can tell that just that in
It
itself.
looks like
can be-
HDP.
Right, like it was put in like with
In
purpose.
this little hole here, it looks like it's HDP, so.
In all honesty, but if you even looked at the debris that's inside it,
Do you want me to?
it's way, no. It goes beyond the date that the Mellows ever purchased that property. So, but I don't think it got put in that night.
Right,
So-
well, then again, you can never be too sure.
So maybe
That
we
would
should-
have to,
would
that
you
would
tell me
entail
is that-
stopping traffic on Old Hebron Road and try and do that. It's,
So I guess we're just interested in what our next course of action should be to mitigate this. I mean, obviously, we have to get.
I think you're
through the
already doing it.
lawsuit.
You're right, you gotta get through that.
Right.
Is the property for sale?
No.
Which property?
The 3 acres, no.
No, it's
There's
frozen.
the other two things there's only two things that can happen here. Either the court system makes
The
the
decision.
current owner mitigate,
Yep.
or if he were to sell, he or she were to sell it, then the new parties would have to come before the planning board.
Well, the bonds have an option to buy that, so it depends on how it gets settled. So that if we lose, the bonds have the option of having that 3
Yeah,
acre.
currently it's a lawsuit for adverse possession.
And in that case, if they're not gonna do anything with it after they purchase it, because if they're just gonna purchase it because they wanna own it, not do anything to it, then you're gonna be right back to square one, new buyer. It's not gonna be the town.
So.
If they're gonna modify that piece of property, now it's gotta come before the planning board.
So essentially, if we get out on the backside of this and everything, and they still somehow have retained ownership, and let's say the new owners don't want to do anything with it, what steps do we have to take at that point in order to divert that water, other than us, short of us cutting in a brand new swill in our upper field and sending
That's
it?
what you,
We would essentially have to do all the work ourselves, and we wouldn't be able to.
no, we can't.
Right, obviously you
We
can't.
can't go outside of the right of way of that
Right.
road.
Could also talk to whoever the new owners are and
One of the issues is
work with them.
Right.
is that culvert goes
So I
out
have to do
straight
my
out,
numbers.
and then the field has a mound. So the water can't go any further than that mound. So the only way to correct that is to dig a swale right through the middle of that field
Right.
and direct it.
And that's what he's talking about.
That cannot happen.
No,
With
they're-
you guys, right, exactly. And we have no problem, no issues doing all of our own dirt work or doing any of that own, but it's just, we don't wanna be on the short end of the stick where, okay, the Mellows retain ownership and they don't wanna do anything and they just wanna own it, let's say, and they don't care about where any of the water on the property goes, but now we're gonna lose, we potentially have the risk of losing part of our house due to all the damage to the trees. So if pines start coming down onto my house, I'm gonna be fairly upset, because that's just gonna be another thing I'm gonna have to throw money at, when we could have hopefully.
In the last few weeks, you've seen me out there to try to see if there's anything we could do to mitigate. I mean, I see you have the mitigation plan in here, Barbara. The feds won't let us touch that.
So we'd have to
New Hampshire has
kinda,
a real strict law in regards to that type of a road, and there's very few in the state.
interesting. So then I guess the next step would be,
Petition the state.
yeah, essentially,
Or, wait for the suit to
Well, to
end.
settle
to
and
end,
say.
yeah, we have to see how that, everything. Well, a question actually I might have, potential of that road becoming a privately owned road.
Old Hebron Road?
State won't allow it?
It's town.
Have to be, it's town road, right, but it's scenic state highway, so,
I'm not touching it.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it can't be. I'm just saying we get spoken to when we just say something wrong
right,
about that road. I'm sure all your neighbors are listening in.
right, oh, I hope so. I'm
I don't
sure.
have the road on the market.
I was just curious as what.
State
the-
already gave us one road, Highland Street. If they want to trade us,
Right, trade, right. But, so, okay.
I don't see the state wanting to take over.
Right,
Problem
but
like
I
that.
was thinking more of a
Like an
private, like
association?
us, essentially
Like a
taking over that
residential
road.
association that would.
Yeah, I mean, there could be a private road, but now it's a town road.
Just
so
remember,
what-
you're gonna have to if it ever became a private road, we wouldn't be out there at all.
Right, exactly. Maintenance would fall upon the people who essentially.
Then
live-
everybody in town, we'll get a call from the state now. The legislative body of this town would have to vote on whether to give up that road. It is an east to west means of travel. There's not too much east to west.
Right, but it's
on the side of the
also,
state.
it's also on the back 40 of Plymouth, so you don't really go on that road. Like, I mean, you have Tenny Mountain. Like, I know everybody loves to use Old Haven Road as a
I have to
shortcut.
beg to differ with that, because I also have to deal with all the people that want to see it remain exactly what it is, because they go for a ride.
Right.
So if it became private, people would be afraid that they wouldn't even be able to walk the road. And we have a lot of hikers that go out there and just walk the road.
Oh, yeah.
It's one of the best views in Plymouth. So it's being protected for a reason.
But when I talked to Brian Murphy, my last resort was that whoever ends up owning that lot, if they decide to build or whoever decides to buy it, if it comes down to that, I told Brian that they should do a site plan where they incorporate the drainage and how to make it work for both properties.
Exactly.
Right.
And even a
And
leach.
so that's the best that I can do, is make that recommendation.
Right, it's just interesting because I know that in order to have easements to alter the runoff of water, you have to have all affected properties, all the owners of the affected properties sign off on it. And it's just interesting that the town doesn't, and maybe the state might have that easement or a previous easement on record, but it's interesting that the town doesn't have that record.
They didn't have computers back then.
I'm sure you guys had files and all that.
And I'm not
so
saying somewhere in the safe.
might be
There might be,
somewhere.
yeah.
But under, basically, in your recollection, no easement has ever been established for that drainage, right?
That we could find. I mean, I try to see if there was ways, when I'm down in DC, I could get you mitigation money to try to touch something like that, but it's, we're having enough problems in that area just because of Bell Road.
Right.
Because we would have had $300,000 more to asphalt Bell Road, and people in that area didn't want it asphalted. Half the people. So,
But I guess I appreciate you bringing this to our attention. I think, we'll work with you on a resolution once, the court settlement is done, and we have something to offer you.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, good luck. I've got a little dilemma. I have to be at the Clear Lake meeting at 7. I'm the chair, so I know I'm the chair here, but I don't think we're gonna make it.
Let's take distance. Go fast.
Okay, so, our next guest, Karen Johnson, Zach Johnson, Brendan Hook, discuss possibility of crosswalk at the intersection of Smith and Highland Streets. Please approach the bench.
More than one allowed to approach?
Yes. Yes,
we're not being televised live.
okay.
Is that good or bad?
So,
It's fine.
You're on tape, so we'll play it tonight.
so they can edit the swears, is that what you're trying to say?
No.
Oh, hello.
Hello. First of all, I want to thank the Select Board and the Town Administrator for the wonderful ceremonies that took place during Memorial Day. They were very touching, and they were very poignant, and it was a very nice presentation. So thank you for the efforts on that.
Good to see your scouts there.
And I also want to take the opportunity to thank the town administrator and the highway department for all of the work that they have been doing over the years. This is not my first appearance before the select board when it comes to matters of Smith Street. And we have come a very long way in a very positive direction. And that's because of the hard work of Paul and Joe. So I just want to say thank you to you both for all of your efforts over the years to improve the conditions in the neighborhood. I've noticed them, the neighbors have noticed them. It's a better place than it once was. How did we get here today? So, as I mentioned, I had been before the board as recently as 2011. The Record Enterprise actually wrote about it, so I dug that up, And they, one of the things that we talked about during that meeting was the idea of a crosswalk at the corner of Smith Street and Highland Street. And so fast forward to the last year or so, Karen Johnson and Zach Johnson and their family and their 4 boys moved to the house at the corner of Smith and Highland. And they observed the same thing that I observed, is that it's a dangerous intersection for pedestrians. I'm disappointed that Mr. Ahern is not here tonight, because I've had some one-on-one conversations with him about this issue as well. And what he had indicated was put together a petition with signatures, and that would perhaps get the attention of the select board. And so Karen and Zach took the initiative on that. I'm not going to read the whole page just in the interest of time, but I'll just read the first paragraph. It says, Honorable Select Board members, we, the undersigned Plymouth, New Hampshire residents who reside along the south side of Highland Street and along Smith Street, hereby formally request that the town of Plymouth install a sidewalk along the south side of Highland Street between Broadway and Reservoir Road, or in the alternative, install a crosswalk crossing Highland Street at the intersection of Smith Street and Highland Street. And I'll present this to the chair. There's over 40 signatures as part of that petition. The interesting thing about the Smith Street neighborhood is that, in addition to the people that actually live there, there's lots of folks that visit one way or another. This past fall, we actually had a group of neighbors from the Maple Street and Hilltop Road neighborhoods actually walk through a path that DeCage was generous enough to provide, in search of a different way of getting to the elementary school in the morning. So we had literally a throng of individuals coming down Dick Age's driveway, just looking for just different ways to get to school. And we've got other people that are visiting the neighborhood, going from downtown to Smith Street. I brought the 2009 annual report, not to quote any facts or figures or budgetary information, but just to state on the record that my son Nathaniel Hoke is a native son of the town of Plymouth. He couldn't be here tonight. He's got a baseball game that he's involved with. So some of the signatures that are on that sheet include Principal Flynn, who I had a nice conversation with last week. She is the principal of the elementary school. She expressed concern over the safety of the intersection, and seeing a proper way for children to get to school. As I mentioned, Dick H. and John Wood, prominent Plymouth citizens, have signed it. Phil Lamoureux, who's on the Board of Education, has also signed it. So it's gaining attention from folks in the community. It's one of these situations that seems typical for New England. You can't get there from here. There's only really 2 ways to get from Smith Street to the other side of Highland Street. That's at the corner of Smith and Highland, or it's at the corner of Highland and Reservoir Road. For my son to walk to school, I encourage him to take Smith Street all the way down to Highland Street, because I'm fearful of him walking on Reservoir Road without a sidewalk and a speed limit of 30 miles per hour, especially in the wintertime when there are snowbanks on either side of the roadway. It's an imperfect situation given the roads and the way they've evolved over time, and just like we were talking about with the last issue, these are roads that have been here for a long time. I'm very thankful to Karen and Zach for bringing up bringing this to the attention of the board once again, and I think what caused this was the imminent repaving of Highland Street. This is kind of a bittersweet sort of situation, because with the repaving of Highland Street, that will most likely cause vehicles to once again increase their speed along Highland Street, making it more of a challenge for pedestrians. The potholes and the road condition in front of the recently completed Habitat for Humanity house actually tends to slow down the traffic a little bit to make things easier. What the petition asks for is a sidewalk to get from the Smith Street intersection to the corner of Reservoir Road, which I believe is an expensive solution, both short-term in terms of the cost of installation and long-term in terms of the time and effort it takes the town to manage the sidewalk. The alternative is a crosswalk, which I think would solve many issues. Nobody in the conversations that I've had, we're not asking for a guard. Certainly there are other crosswalks on Highland Street that are not guarded. We're just looking for a simple crosswalk to basically fall in line with all the other crosswalks along Highland Street. If you take a look, every other intersection with Highland Street has a crosswalk, except for Cooper Street, which is a very small street that I don't believe has a very high residential population, if any. Cooper's right behind the Plymouth Pediatrics. And so because there's all those crosswalks in place, drivers get a false sense of security when they approach Smith Street because they don't think about people crossing there because there's no crosswalk there. So we're looking to try and improve things. As I mentioned, my son, he turned 8 last year. He'll be 9 in December. He's just started walking to school on his own. Previously, myself or my wife would take him to the corner and cross him, with a parent across Highland Street, and let him walk the rest of the way where there's other means for him to get to school safely. But he's eager to exercise his independence. So I ask you this on behalf of Karen and Zach and the other pedestrians and in the neighborhood to consider doing this at a time when you're already doing the paving, you're already bringing things under construction. It was always my vision that when that phase of the Highland Street repaving process would happen, that the crosswalk would naturally be an automatic part of that process. So I think we're just looking to hopefully ensure that sort of thing can be looked at.
Do you want to address it? You want me to address it?
What's that? Yeah, please address it, yeah.
The irony is the paving of Highland Street is your best chance. Had the state given us the $1.1 million, by the way, it definitely would have happened. The way it stands right now is if there's money left over, then that's the first thing that's going to get addressed. Joe will emulate the crosswalk at Reservoir Road because we have to have a landing spot. We can't put a crosswalk and have the kids land in the middle of Smith Road.
And I think we're in a really good position because we've got landowners adjacent that...
And that's what Joe's plans are, but we have to see how far the money goes. We have no money. We have the money that we save to do what we're doing. So if the contractor comes under budget, which he's trying to do, that's the first thing that's going to get addressed.
So, my only concern with the whole thing is, most of your sidewalks, crosswalks, have a sidewalk on the other side. So when you're dumping off there, a place to go. So even though you have that landing, if you put it in, and that's fine during the summer, but you're still gonna be in the same boat that you are on Reservoir in the wintertime. You're still gonna have snowbanks, and so that's my only issue is dealing, because we don't maintain Reservoir in the wintertime. So I mean, we come up and down Highland, but we don't maintain that section of Highland. So in the wintertime, it's gonna be a seasonal thing.
And I'm actually I'm glad you brought that up because that's a concern of mine because there were times when we wanted to use that Reservoir crosswalk and you're right, that historically the town has not maintained that landing pad on the southwest corner of Highland and Reservoir. And I get very concerned about that from a liability perspective for the town.
That's why we have a crossing guard there.
But the crossing guard isn't there 24/7. And so given the ADA laws that are on the books, it would seem that the town...
If we brought that into place, please be careful tonight, all right? Because we'll be taking crosswalks out. We had to do a lot to be able to get permission to put that one the way it is.
I understand.
And I'm saying very quietly that we'll try to do the same. We're going to copy the one that we have at Reservoir. It's It's the only thing that'll work there. We cannot send kids into the middle of another road.
Right, well, we're not asking for the.
But what Joe's worried right now is, his concern is we are now encouraging kids in the wintertime to cross over there in an area that he can't maintain in the wintertime.
Well, just add to that point and to go along, as we talk about that you can't maintain the crosswalk at Reservoir, that the children are not just crossing it during the school hours. And Smith Street is a quieter street for the kids to walk down than Reservoir when you do have the snowbanks, when you do have the traffic. It's actually a safer access point for the kids.
And from a legal perspective too, in terms of a vehicle requiring to yield to a pedestrian in a crosswalk, if you've got, a child there looking to cross, more often than not, a vehicle will stop because they realize, hey, I need to obey the law and yield to that pedestrian that's in the crosswalk. The vehicle can't obey the law if they don't know a crosswalk is there, which is another reason why we're
Those type of crosswalks are very hard to see in the wintertime. That's our biggest problem. We have one at Langdon Street for the hospital, and we put up signs. We put up approach signs now.
But I would have to say, anything we can do to, if it's difficult to see or not, anything we can do if the finances are there to make it safer for the kids is greatly appreciated. And Joe's gone out of his way to explain it all. He's been
And that's
extremely.
our plans. I mean, Joe has taken into consideration things that he can let go to take care of safety first. Everything we're doing this job with half the money that the state should give us. Out of your own pockets. Citizens of this town, we have 450,000. We had 500. We had to do the engineering. We were supposed to get $1.1 million from the state this year to do it. That will be coming back hopefully earlier than 2027 when they told us. And then we will start at the beginning of Highland Street and go out to Tenny Mountain Highway at that time. But for now, Joe's goal is to make that pothole free and as safe as possible.
I share your disappointment with the state. I really do. And I appreciate your efforts.
Because I preached everything that you just preached to us. I preached the safety of the kids, the ADA requirements, and all those things, and the fact that they gave us the road in that condition.
Right.
So,
But you were advocating to leave the potholes there, is that it?
Honestly, I'm not.
I don't share that view.
That presents a different safety scenario.
I'm kidding.
Yeah, it's and I'm thankful for the town for taking action, and I'm thankful for your efforts again. I'm remiss in not thanking you sooner.
So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
thanks, guys.
I'm gonna have to see if I can call Lisa Donor. A second. Hopefully she's at this meeting. Hey Lisa, are you at the PROLAC meeting? Well, when you get there, apologize because I'm in a select board meeting and it'll probably be another 15 minutes. All right? Okay. Thank you. We'll see you. Bye.
That's the first.
That's gotta go first.
Okay. Next up, we have
It's first.
a recommendation to accept an award for cleaning services for Town Hall, Library, and Police Department to Lakeview Clean. And I guess we're just updating. We don't need to have anyone, or is anyone here to?
No, you have to accept it.
I'm sorry, I'm getting kind of flummoxed.
We discussed it.
I make a motion, we accept the bid from
Lakeview Clean.
who is it?
Lakeview
Lakeside Cleaning for cleaning of the town hall, library, and police department, of which the library would be paid for by the trustees.
By their budget,
Was it-
John.
Is there a second? All right.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Thank you, John. Oops.
Thank you.
Welcome. And Jesse Jennings and Dave Allwine from Stantec regarding the new regulations put out by the state.
Evening.
Evening.
So, on May 9th, a letter came from DES, Department of Environmental Services, saying that we need to comply with new regulations that they put out. So, the town of Plymouth has been exempt from landfill testing every year for quite some time. DES is now wanting to make us do testing every year. And we were exempt due to our testing being below minimum standards in our inspections. So I called up Dave Allwine from Stantec. He does all the testing, analysis, inspection, and generates our annual report. And he was trying to explain to me that what's going on. And it's like we have to do more. And comes with another price figure from their proposal. So then I informed Paul, let him know what's going on with the landfill, and we'll try to get him answers. So that's why Dave's here. He's the expert.
I went ahead and called up Linda Birmingham, who was the person at DES Solid Waste to actually sign the letter that they had sent. Because frankly, I didn't really know why they had done this either. I monitor a number of other landfills in New Hampshire besides Plymouth's, and most of them have gotten basically the same letter. And what Linda told me, somewhat reluctantly it seemed, is that over time, the solid waste department had lost a lot of people, and I guess at some point they were down to only about 2.
You had one.
Yeah, they were well understaffed for sure, considering that there's hundreds of closed landfills in the state. And they think as a result of that, there was not sufficient supervision of the people that were still there, and the people that were there were making modifications to the permits for a lot of the landfills, including Plymouth, that they didn't have actual authority to be doing. So what Linda's point is that the recommendations that were in their letter that just went out to Plymouth and all these other towns is basically representing the minimum scope of work that the solid waste division now feels is required. So although it represents in a lot of cases increased cost to the town, the towns have actually been getting by, in their opinion, with a substandard scope for years because they should not have been cut back in the first place. So this is what Linda told me just today. So the proposal that we had originally done for the town predated the letter and was predicated on the original scope when we were basically doing the landfill post-closure monitoring every other year, whereas now they're requiring it every year. So they basically doubled the amount of work that they're asking for.
So looking at their rules, and it looks like they were last passed in 2014. They did specify the frequency, that was consistent with that letter that we received. So it looks like we've been, kind of like substandard for like 4 years or something.
Well, not just you.
No,
A
but
lot of towns.
but
We also had nobody to send it to, Bill.
well, that's true too. Yep.
So,
So it, obviously, we don't have the money to, like, expend to afford this, and there is, looks like appears to be like no need to do this. Now, convincing a state agency to you know, kind of like modify or soften their requirement, you know, might be kind of difficult, but that's one that I would be advocating for, you know, to perhaps put pressure on them to.
Well, in my experience, I don't get the feeling that they will probably back off the requirement, at least in the long term. That's what they'll want. Whether or not you actually start doing it this year or next year, I mean, let's be honest, we've been doing it how we've been doing it for a number of years, and nothing's blown up, you know. So I think if somebody, particularly from the town, speaks to her and makes a recommendation that, you know, we don't have the intention of ignoring this, but the reality is that we have no way of paying for it, and that's just a simple fact. So as long as you're good with us starting this next year, when we can actually plan for it and budget it, we're okay. You know, my experience with DES is that they don't throw out fines and whatnot. They're just not that you know, terrible.
Right.
So I get the feeling that if you were to present that to Linda Birmingham, that there's a good chance she would, because you're not the only one who is complaining about this. There's a lot of other towns that are too.
Still might be an opportunity, though, to, you know, encourage them to go through rulemaking, which they would do in 8 years. Now it's been 4, so, you know, they could theoretically, you know, correct something that doesn't seem to be a problem as far as, you know, contamination that cropped up by surprise.
Right.
You know, we've been doing
Well,
it for,
I know from working, you know, not only in New Hampshire, but we do a fair amount of work in Massachusetts too. They all work somewhat similarly, where the regulators have a certain amount of discretion to change a town's permit, but they can only take it so far. In fact, I had a conversation not long ago with some of the regulators in Massachusetts about this very same thing. It's like my client, who was a small town in Massachusetts, you know, they want to see if they can cut back the scope, you know, make it a little bit cheaper for themselves. And they said, well, we can do these things, but we can't decrease the number of times we sample. You have to do this every year. You can't do it every other year. But maybe we can cut back on the number of points you have to sample, but we can't cut down the frequency that you do it. And in one way, New Hampshire, under these new rules, seems kind of similar. It's like you have to do this twice a year. You have to do it twice a year annually. You can't do it less than that. That's the minimum that they want to see all the closed landfills do.
And the 12 years that I had Jesse's job, all the results of the test were well below the minimum.
Yeah, I mean, the Plymouth
And
landfill.
is it not true that only one
innocuous.
landfill in the state, there's only one that doesn't have to test?
That
Or
could
does
be
that,
because I'm not.
does that one not exist either?
I'd be, well, eventually, the idea is that there's this post-closure monitoring period, and that is not forever. It has an end point. Now, it might be 30 years out, it might be 40 years, but the intent is that these things are going to be done with at some point, but they're usually measured in decades. So for all of us, we'll, you know, it might as well be forever.
Because they're discussing the river again and bringing back, that was cut back due to restrictions of, monetary restrictions and manpower. DES went from 14 down to 1 at that time, in that particular department. We don't have it in the budget.
yeah. So I guess that's if the option is to, you know, appeal to DES to see if they can not necessarily invoke that this year and wait for our next budget year, then Jesse's still going to be stuck with a budget area that's,
Yep. And not just once, twice.
yeah.
Because it's we're going to this year, and then going to the next year, it's gonna be,
You know, it's twice in a year.
yeah. I mean, like, I would definitely recommend to appeal to DES and have them say, look, you gave this letter at a very bad time for several towns. If you haven't heard these complaints, then you need to hear these complaints. Like, you're asking us to do more when we were allowed to do one thing. Not our fault, not Stantec's fault, it's DES's fault. So give us enough time so that way we can budget it.
Well, arguably, I mean, the rules have been in effect for 4 years.
Yeah, but I still have to disagree with you, because we would call, and they would tell us not to worry about it.
Yeah, but the rules have been in effect for 4 years. Just because they didn't know enough to, explain it correctly, is another issue until now.
You also have a place, you need to have a place to drop it off. It's,
So what I was getting
we
at,
can drop it, it's mute anyway. We have to always do what the state mandates to do. And now we gotta go from once a year to twice a year, and it sounds like we're gonna make up for the
but again, what
years.
I said was that you could encourage them to go through rulemaking. If it affects a number of municipalities, and it's going to be like, we're going to be like expending a lot of money. Rulemaking is not that bad of a process. So, if they would consider that, then that's an option too. And believe me, municipalities might really be, willing to get behind that. So,
You understand it.
yep, we can do it. John?
Dave, you were saying something about the number of marks or something.
Number of marks?
The number of sample points.
No, it's just the
Sample
sample
points,
point.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah, they, usually, the post-closure monitoring requires usually a couple of different tasks. One is an inspection of the landfill cap itself to look for damage, erosion, groundhog holes, things that are compromising the cap integrity. Looking at the vents, make sure the vents are in proper shape, they haven't been run over by the lawnmower, things like that. So you look at the cap. You also, in many cases, but not every case, there's usually landfill vents or what they call gas monitoring wells that you use some field instrument to measure whether or not there's any methane coming off, or you measure a number that they refer to as a percent LEL, lower explosive limit, which is basically a function of how much methane is coming off. And maybe a couple other landfill gas parameters. So there will usually be a certain number of those points that you have to monitor, and even sometimes monitoring the inside of any buildings, the breathing space for these parameters as well. So if you do the measurements over the length of time and you're constantly getting 0% LEL, and you're not getting any hydrogen sulfide or any other typical landfill gas, that you could make I think you could make an argument for decreasing the number of points that you would have to monitor. And I think that could reasonably probably be reduced to a certain level. They would probably get this kind of a minimum where they went, well, we want you to at least do these, whatever, these 3 or these 5 or whatever. So that might be a
we
possibility.
could submit something like that based on the,
Yeah, based on history. I mean, if you've got 10 years of history with these wells that basically show no impact, well, I'd say there's probably not going to be any impact after that amount of time. So why do we bother measuring? So that might be one way to possibly cut the overall cost down, even if you do have to do the twice per year monitoring events.
okay.
Maybe we can remind them that we didn't have to close it at the time that we did. They came to us and asked if we could be a good example that they could use for others to do it. We didn't have to do it at that time. And they told us how all this would go away. It's kind of like giving us Highland Street.
Anyway, I think if you approach, or if we approach DES to see if we can at least hold off until the new fiscal year to do twice a year testing, and then maybe look at the rulemaking process or speak with people at solid waste that perhaps approach that. But
Do we have a cost on that, Dave?
I'm sorry?
A cost on that so the public can know?
The cost that I had sent to Jesse was about $1,750, something like that. That included something like $675 per visit to do the inspection and any landfill gas monitoring, and like $500 for the report that has to go in every year. So it's
$10,000 now.
But that
For the
includes
total, for
for
everything.
the actually the groundwater monitoring too as well.
And that's what I'm saying, we're up to $10,000.
Yeah, no, that includes, we're actually talking about two separate monitoring.
Right, but the
bits
same
here.
people that are making
Yeah,
us
you've
do
got the
it.
solid waste requirements, which are what we're talking about. Then you have the hazardous waste division requirements, which is the groundwater management permit and the groundwater sampling and all of that malarkey.
Our stormwater assessment plan.
okay, so
Let me know what they say.
Jesse, are you gonna be contacting DES then, or
I
Joanne?
definitely
or-
can. I think somebody with a little bit more weight should. Send a letter.
It should come from the Board of Selectmen.
Send a letter to Linda, I wouldn't say so much Linda Birmingham, because she is not the head
Enforcement?
of her department.
Okay.
No, what I think I would start with Linda. I think she's more sympathetic. Or she would at least tell us which direction.
I mean, I think it would be a phone call too, not necessarily.
I wouldn't want to go over her head.
Yeah, actually, that's probably smart, just to,
Start with a call and say.
Because there's a ton of towns complaining about this, so I wouldn't want to circumvent Linda
right.
when she's trying to deal with this herself.
Do you want me to call, or do you have her number, or what's the contact information?
We'll get that for you.
I have it.
Yeah, it's on the back of this if you want.
Oh, excellent. Okay, I guess I got that. Oh, do I get that? I don't know, maybe not. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jess.
Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you.
I will say, when I spoke with her, she's relatively new too to the group, so I think a lot of what she knows, she's heard third hand,
Yeah.
and didn't have a lot to do with what maybe happened 5 years ago or 10 years ago.
Yep.
But she seems reasonably reasonable to deal with, so hopefully you can convince her. So,
All right.
anyway, good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any, what are we looking at here? We're looking at committee reports. Any committee reports?
John, do you have any?
I have none.
I have one. I have two, actually. I've got the Conservation Commission, which met on the 15th of May. They had a Cub Scout presentation concerning a hike they did in the Walter Newton area, and used a great little slide presentation to illustrate about 25 places along the trail that needed attention, on things like broken bridges and blazes that needed paint and trees down across the road, and the kids are going for the Cub Scout Conservation Award, so they deserve it for that. But that was the first hour of the Conservation Commission. Then they had a guest who talked about potential for a grant for the White Mountain Trail Collective, which is a relatively new nonprofit that will help with trail work in the White Mountain National Forest and could eventually involve Plymouth State students and, I guess, Plymouth. And they also had Ryan Harvey was there. He's a forester who's got has done a lot of work helping Plymouth and other conservation commissions. And he presented a proposal for work in the Walter Newton area to improve trail durability and drainage, and gave them costs, and they voted to, they were still confused about the budget freeze, and they now have it straight that the budget freeze does not apply to them, but in any case, they were willing to use some of their conservation fund towards the work if they needed to. And also, National Trails Day is on June 2nd, and they are hoping to have volunteers at the Walton Newton area to do some outreach, seeking more volunteers to help with the work there.
What
Yeah.
date was that?
Second.
June 2nd.
That'll be a graduation.
I know. And Kathy, I've got their minutes from that meeting, so you can start. I know you've had trouble getting minutes. Then I went to the Energy Commission meeting on the 16th of May, and they had Kevin Foley of Sun East Development there, which is building a large-scale solar project in Campton, and he spoke about what his company's capabilities are. And I think that we are going to hopefully see reps from the Plymouth Energy Commission at one of our meetings in the near future to discuss what this board wants from them. I think they're looking for some direction and support. So that was it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any public comments? Having seen none, we need to go into a non-public session. So is there a motion to go into non-public under RSA 91A:3, Roman numeral 2, A through A and C?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
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 Aye.